Aussie cricket fans are rejoicing at our stunning victory in the Boxing Day Test, with Australia pulling off one of the greatest sporting victories ever at the MCG in Melbourne. A record crowd filled the ground over all 5 days of the Test, with 74,000 fans attending on the final day, where the result against India came down to the very last hour. For their take, let's bring in 7 News presenter Karina Carvalho and journalist Joe Hillbrown. Good morning to you both. Now, Karina, you're actually a multicultural ambassador for the cricket. I think that's one of the things that stood out to me, was how diverse the crowd was, how well everyone got on, the spirit of the game. And we're talking huge crowds, 71,000 people on the final day. It's unheard of.
Yeah, it was absolutely huge, wasn't it, for day 5? I don't think the MCG was quite prepared for that number of people to turn up. But I think over the course of the days, people found out that tickets were just $10 and kids could get in free. They decided on a beautiful Monday in Melbourne to go to the MCG and watch what was a fantastic ending to this test match that kind of had absolutely everything in it over the course of the 5 days. I think the total crowd over the 5 days was more than 373,000, which breaks the previous MCG test record by tens of thousands. And that was set back in the Bradman era in the 1930s. And that test match actually went over 6 days. And I think that crowd was something like 350,000. I think a lot of it is off the back of this huge Indian fan base that the Indian cricket team takes with them wherever they go. And they turn out in numbers and in force, and they bring the atmosphere as well. I was there on Boxing Day. It was the place to be. The atmosphere was electric.
It's so wonderful for Melbourne too, isn't it? And I think, Joe, even if you don't follow cricket closely, the storylines, Sam Constance, the Virat Kohli bump,
got everything. That's right, yeah. And I'm far from a cricket tragic, but this thing had absolutely everything. You could not have scripted it better. If they'd made a Hollywood movie about how the thing is, you go, no, come on, no way. That's the script of the Mighty Ducks. That doesn't work. But I think it was fantastic. I think the crowds were fantastic. I think it was, to be honest, my own hometown of Melbourne, I think it was a bit of a shot in the arm that Melbourne needed. It's had a bit of a rough trot over the last couple of years, and it's good to remind it that it is still the sporting capital of Australia. Obviously, we've got the New Year's Test in Sydney coming up, and that should produce an incredible, electrifying 5 days of rain, as is the time-honoured tradition.
I'm actually not sure about that, Joe.
I think yeah, go.
I think it's pretty clear, weather-wise, which is fantastic, because that has been historically one of the criticisms of the Sydney Test, is that it always rains. But I think they're expecting capacity crowds for the first 3 days, something like 46,000 people each day.
Yeah, and we get to see Sam again and the drama. We cannot wait for that. And, of course, the pink test as well. Moving on, let's talk fuel prices. East Coast fuel prices are in the spotlight this morning, with growing calls for an investigation, as motorists in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, they're paying on average more than $250 for fuel more a year compared to Perth. So that's because smaller Aussie cities apparently have a 1-week price cycle among fuel retailers, while larger East Coast cities see consistent price cycling over 6 weeks. That feels like it's worth a bit of a look into, Karina.
Absolutely, and I think this is quite clever from the NRMA. We're in that period between Christmas and New Year where no one knows what date it is, let alone what day it is, but everyone is spending a lot of time in the car, heading down to the coast, heading away on holidays, and so they're really feeling that price pressure at the petrol pump. And so I think this is clever from the NRMA. I think the response from the federal government and the ACCC, because the federal government would need to instigate an ACCC inquiry into the petrol prices. Let's see how that plays out. But I think if you were to tell people in Perth that they had cheap petrol, they tell you, what? I'm from Perth. I don't think anyone over there thinks that petrol is all that cheap, but I think it's really dependent on the city that you're living in. I recently moved from Sydney to Melbourne. I feel like petrol prices in Melbourne are much cheaper than what I was paying in Sydney. So these things are all relative, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's like they kept on going up and up and up, Joe, and they never seem to be coming down.
Yeah, you ever get a sense of deja vu? I feel like this is about the 1,048th inquiry we've had into petrol prices. There always seems to be an uncanny similarity between the way prices go up and down. Also, I would suggest everyone should get their Fuel Watch app, certainly if you're in New South Wales and in other jurisdictions. There is such a huge gap between what often smaller and independent petrol prices are and the big names. And you can, I mean, just I'm crazy about it because I don't have any personal life whatsoever. But you know, it's literally a matter of between 20 or 30 cents a litre on any given day, and you just think, well, hang on a minute.
You're doing all
are you getting your oil from a different Saudi Arabia? So there's clearly something going on.
Okay, finally, we're going to finish on this. New Year's resolutions. One of the things that's trending on social media is what's in and what's out. So, ironically, one of the things that's out is making New Year's resolutions, but we're going to put that aside for now. So on your list of what's in and what's out, things like planless Sundays, trying new recipes, that's in, out, caring what other people think, hobbies. Karina, do you have any ins and outs for the new year?
Look, I feel like those in and out lists are basically just New Year's resolutions rebranded, right? And written in the notes section of your iPhone, which for me is where my whole life lives, in the notes section of my iPhone. But I find with those lists that if they are too long or if there's too many things on them, you're probably not going to attack the list because it can feel overwhelming. So just do like one thing.
Just a short list. Just a short list. Joe, have you got a short list?
Yeah. I've got a New Year's resolution. It's a bit hard to say on national television, but I think it's time I faced up to things and left behind my family. I gave it a go, but they're just such hard work. The kids.
You know what the funny thing is? It's actually their New Year's resolution as well to leave you behind.
So there
that's
you go.
Worked out really well for
it's
2025.
Perfect. I knew we had a common synergy.
Sunrise, bringing happy families together. Joe, thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And a genuine Happy New Year to you, Karina.